Hey, Yvonne.
Hello.
Good to see you again. I know it's just been a few minutes. Welcome back to Mississippi College. This is our AIGA group. I've got a couple of students off to the side behind me as well. I do want to introduce you to a few people. Erin, lean in.
Okay, I'm leaning in further. Hi.
This is Erin Whistler. She's our AIGA president.
Wait, I should lean in a little bit further. Come here, you.
Catherine Marie, she is our secretary. We have a couple of our teachers in the back. Mr. Kent Mummer teaches our web design and our basic design. And right now you're in Mississippi College's Gore Gallery. This is our student and our Mississippi Gallery collection. And Mr. Randy Jolly is our gallery coordinator. He's helping kind of set everything up with us today.
Cool. I like the cat skull t-shirt.
Oh,
Thank you.
very cool. We've been looking at a lot of your work, even some of the things that we see behind you on your wall. Very, very interested. I've got some freshmen who are learning how to use Adobe Illustrator. I've got students who are in drawing classes, and we watched some of your creative videos on how you use drawing and how you use software. So that's kind of, I invited them to ask you questions, this kind of thing. I'll break the ice. I'll start us off.
Sure.
One thing I like to ask is, how do you know, or when did you know you wanted to be an artist? When did you know you were really good and you wanted to do this?
Probably when I reached freshman level algebra. That's when I realized I want to get into art, you know, so. No, I've been drawing ever since I was a little kid, so I've always liked art. And my freshman year in high school, we had a print production class, and I had no clue what any of that was, and I signed up for it, and we had a full printing press facility within our high school, and so we learned the whole process from the production side all the way to making film. This is pre-digital, obviously. Burning plates and printing on the offset printing machines. And so after I did, our first assignment was we had to design a business card. And the only rule was it couldn't be for a real business. It just had to be fictitious. And so I think I did something like Bulldog Trucking or something like that. And I designed a card, and when I turned in my assignment, and when you turn in your assignment, you'd turn in the final printed product, the mechanical, the plates, everything, and then you get graded on it. And the teacher calls me into his office, and he's holding up the business card, and he said, "You sure this isn't a real business card?" And I'm going, "You're holding it?" And he goes, "No, I mean, is this a real business?" And I go, "No." I go, "So if I call this phone number on here, it's not going to go to Bulldog Trucking." And I go, "No, it's going to go to my mom." You know? And he didn't believe me, so he picks up the phone and he calls it. And my mom picks up, and after that, it's like he let me do anything I wanted in that class. It's like I guess he was impressed by the business card, and so I'd print up my own notepads and just all kinds of stuff. It was fun. So that's when I really kind of realized I probably wanted to do this for a living.
Okay. What kind of education did you pursue after that? So you started off just taking one printing type class. Did you do anything else to develop your skills, develop your artistic set?
I took art class in high school. I can't say it didn't really influence me a whole bunch. I just liked it because you could do some art stuff. But we had somebody from, I originally wanted to go to film school and get into film. Me and my friends would make films growing up. But this is like pre-internet. And so when I went to ask the career counselor, I want information on film school, she came back after 2 weeks and I couldn't find anything. And so somebody came in that next week from the Art Institute of Seattle, and they had a portfolio with them. They showed what they did at that school, and that got me interested in going there. I mean, if I was going to school now, I probably would have ended up going to film school, not art school. But I went to art school. It was a 3-year program, but I got it done in 2 years because I went through the summer, and it was pretty fun. It was kind of unique. Most of the art institutes, you usually just either live in the community or you commute from home, go to school, but the Seattle Art Institute had a relationship with Seattle University, so I actually lived in the dorms when I went to art school, which is a little different than what most people get, so it was fun.
When did you first start noticing professional success? Who were some of your first clients or type of work you got?
The very first job I had out of art school, it took me about 8 months to find a job after I graduated, and it was for a hole-in-the-wall screen printer. And literally, I remember people coming in, people who hang out at a tavern, and their softball team needed a design, and they had drawn it up on a napkin and brought it in. Hey, I want this on a t-shirt. And I'm looking at it, okay, well, you want me to like make it look better? No, we want this on a t-shirt. And so I literally took the napkin and put it in the stat camera and shot the artwork from their stupid napkin. So it wasn't very glamorous, the first stuff I ever worked on. I worked there for about 1.5 years, and then I had a friend in Montana who would call me every Sunday, once again, before the internet. I keep saying that because I think about how much easier it is now to do some of this stuff. But I had a friend that would call me every Sunday, and he'd have me read him the classifieds because he wanted to find another job back in Seattle. And so every Sunday he'd call, I'd read through them, and when I was reading through them one Sunday, there was this position. I go, well, that's a good position. I'm not giving him that one. I'm going to do it. And so that's where my second job came in. It was for a sportswear company up in Seattle, and I worked there for about 5 years, and we did work for all the Target, Kmart, Bon Marché, a bunch of places developing sportswear lines for them and stuff. That was a lot of fun.
I know one thing we talk about in our classes is kind of the importance of networking. One reason we started AIGA is to meet professionals, to go different places. I know you've done work for the Graphic Arts Guild and big promoter of that. How important to you is networking and meeting other artists?
Oh, I think it's how you stay sane. You can relate to one another and swap stories. But I enjoy. I like going places and speaking. I'm going to be speaking at a couple places later this month. But the whole reason, I don't really make any money off that, but I enjoy doing it just because you get to hang out with other creative people. And there's people that I met that way like over a decade ago, and now we've been friends ever since, and we talk and keep in contact. So yeah, I think and we work together from time to time. That's been the only way for me to make some contacts. Otherwise, I would have never met those individuals. So I think networking is a big thing, both not just outside of your scope of influence, but locally as well. Back when I started my business in 2002, I joined the local small business group just so I could get to know some of the other small business owners in town. And I didn't really get a lot from the group, but it helped me to understand the dynamic of how small business operates and what they expect. And it helped me to understand that kind of level of client. Not everything I do is agency. Sometimes it's just a small business owner, especially now with the internet. They find me just as much as an agency. And so understanding how they operate and their real world kind of environment of how they need to market themselves is important.
who are some of your favorite people to work with? Not necessarily clients, but a particular kind of artist or a particular kind of projects you like to work on?
There's a designer, she used to be based out of San Francisco. She does a lot of packaging design for food companies, and I'm kind of like a creative hired gun for some agencies. They'll hire me to work on their behalf for their client. And so I've been working with her for about 8 years now, and I really enjoy working for her because one, we've gotten to know each other professionally over the years, so she knows how I work best. I know how she operates, and so she'll just send me an email, are you available? Yes, okay, and then she just dumps information on me and just leaves me alone. And I ask follow-up questions, but we've really figured out how each other works well, and because of that, we can approach things a lot better. And she likes working with me because I'm able to help her kind of give a wide gamut of exploration rather than just, her take on something. So those are the kind of relationships I like the most. And I work with a handful of studios that way. It's every about 5 years, it kind of changes because I'll be working, like there's one studio in where were they? They were down in New Orleans, and I'd worked with them for like 6 years, is because I'd made a relationship with their marketing manager. And so I became their branding guy. They didn't even have anybody in-house that did it at their ad agency, and so they just farm it to me. And then he left to start a new business with a friend of his, and so that client kind of went away. A new marketing manager came in. I worked with them a few times, but she just didn't organize her thoughts or projects really well and tried to piecemeal everything. It was really hard to do the same capacity of work for them. So it changes. It kind of bums me out when that happens, but that's usually kind of how things work for me.
For me personally, I first kind of was introduced to your work by reading about you dealing with people stealing your work, either copyright infringement or how you've dealt with that. Can you talk to us a little bit about some things you've run into?
Yeah, it wasn't until like 2006 or 7 that I even started paying attention to that, and so anytime it would happen, I had a little text file and I would enter what happened and what website or whatever. And since then, it's probably happened about 400 plus times now. Wow. And I've had to get a copyright lawyer involved maybe about 10 times over the years. But last year at the How Design conference, I did a talk on copyright infringement, and it's called Responding to Ripoffs, and I kind of walk through how to protect your art and how to register it. And what a lot of people don't know about copyright is that as soon as the pen leaves the paper, if you created it, you own it. Everybody owns their own copyright by default. The only reason the government has the website is it allows you to register that copyright. So if you work for an employer and you do a design or an illustration for them, more than likely, unless you have a special kind of arrangement set up, they own the copyright by default, not you, since it's work for hire. But yeah, anything you do personally, you own the copyright on. And so I just kind of, in that talk, I kind of walk people through, you don't always have to get a lawyer involved. Like, for instance, I had a company in Australia who, I don't even think I didn't find it. I think I got an email and somebody said, hey, is this your skull? And it was this illustration, and this company had taken the skull design I did, it made it their brand logo, and it was on everything. It was on shoes, skateboards, vehicles, trade show displays, product, t-shirts, you name it. I mean, it's just everywhere. And I mean, it wasn't like they changed anything really. They just put fangs on it, I think.
Ah.
And so I just documented everything, wrote up a letter, contacted, went to the company's site, figured out where their headquarters were, called it, and got a contact and just asked, can I get a contact information for your legal counsel? And the company is big enough that they had one. And so they gave me an email. I put all this stuff together, kind of presented my case, wrote a cover letter and said, if you guys pay the invoice that's part of this download, then I just consider it, you guys bought it from me and you own it.
Yeah.
And when you approach a lawyer like that, and you make it easy for them, and they know that you have the copyright to back it up, which I did. I had the design copyrighted. I found that they're very reasonable, and they go, you know what, this makes sense. I'm going to tell my client he should do it. And so, yeah, that paid for my daughter's computer for art school.
Are these the kind of things that you just have to learn on your own through experience, or did you learn this from other professionals or other teachers?
Most of it I kind of learned on my own, but it was about 2 years into it that a friend of mine, a designer up in Portland, Jeff Pollard, he referred me to a copyright lawyer. Cole Halver is his name. Actually, he's part of my talk. I went to his office and we videotaped his responses to like 10 questions, and I use those in the talk. He even responds to, if you're a zombie, do you still own your copyright? That was pretty cool. And actually, before I get back to this, to answer that, he said, when you register a copyright, it covers your copyright for your lifetime plus 70 years. If you're a zombie, it covers your copyright forever since you never die, plus 70 years.
Oh, wow.
So that's important. He has a great sense of humor, but Cole kind of clued me in on how copyright works, and he's the one that I've worked with when I've had companies steal art and use it on iPhone covers that they're selling nationwide, and so we had to kind of go after that, and a sticker company, so.
I guess the internet makes it a little bit easier to copy work or to find your works to copy, but it also makes it easier to track people down and see what's being stolen.
Yeah, I used to have samples on my site that people could download, these mini PDF portfolios, so a creative director could have samples to use in a pitch or whatever. I stopped doing that because that's where most of the infringements were coming from. So I have them on my site still, but you have to have a passcode. You have to ask for a passcode to download it, and then I track all those, of course. So
very smart.
Yeah.
One thing a lot of students want to know is, like, what's your work process? If a client comes to you and they have their idea, how do you take that and start to develop it?
Before I do anything creative, I really have to have a project like clear in my head. Like I have to understand what I'm going to be doing, even if I don't know where that's going to go or what I'm going to end up creating. I have to have a clear picture in my head of what I need to do. And so before I start on anything, I really dive into the research part of it. And if I'm not familiar with an industry, then I try to get up to speed so I feel like I understand it. I might not understand every aspect of it, but just in general, I should understand what they do and who they're targeting, what they're going after. And so I ask a lot of questions. I have a creative brief I use where it forces my client to ask themselves a lot of questions that they might not always do, but in doing so, it gives me insight into certain things, and then I follow those up. And then once I think I have a clear picture, that's when I'll start moving forward. So Usually when a client approves a quote and they say, okay, I want you to do my logo, for example, I'm sure a lot of them think, well, Vaughn started on my logo. I usually never start at that point. I'm not doing anything but thinking, and I usually sit on it for a good 3 or 4 days and just letting it roll around in my head. And then that's kind of the way my the creative process works for me. It used to bug me in the early days because I thought I was just procrastinating, and I'm going, why am I doing this? I have all this time. I'm waiting, like not doing anything until I realized that's just the way. And I don't think it's this way for everybody, but that's just the way I work. So I really have to let that gestation period happen to formulate ideas. And then once those ideas start to kind of come to the surface, then I can start working out concepts and really refining them and dialing them in.
Do you have any ways of breaking, if you don't get any creative ideas, kind of just breaking the ice, getting out of a design funk? You know what I mean?
Man, that and that always seems to happen to me right when a deadline's due. I hate that. If I'm really stuck to that level, I have to just unplug from anything creative and just do something non-creative, like go clean my pond in our backyard or whatever, just something that has nothing to do with creativity whatsoever. And usually that helps free me up, or just take a break, just go see a movie, or just then again, I don't always have that luxury. It's like, once again, it might be during a deadline, then I'm like forced to work through it, and that's always the hardest part. It's easy for me to work on something creative when I'm inspired to do it. It's another thing when it feels like my drawing skills have gone on vacation, and for whatever reason I can't draw a turtle, or whatever it is, I say a turtle because I was working on a sea turtle exploration this week, and I don't know any other way to draw a sea turtle now. It's like, those suckers are hard to draw without making them.
I have a lot of students who had the exact same complaint. They just get stuck. They don't know how to get out of it. I'm glad to hear you say exactly that, to see that there are working professionals that face that too.
But I do have a new tool I can use when I get stuck. My daughter just graduated from the design program at the local college, so if I get stuck, I just tell her she has to do my thumbnail sketches, and then I just pay her, and actually she does a really good job. So it has been helpful.
Is she on your payroll? Do you pass along?
She's a freelancer. She's going to be looking for a job in Portland here pretty soon, but I worked on an Adobe project this summer for their mobile applications, and it's kind of like how you can use their mobile apps to design a holiday greeting card. And so she did one all her own, and they liked it and they used it. So she's doing pretty good. You can work, actually, what I'm about to say, you can work in however you want, but I want to share a few things that are coming up on Lynda that people don't really know about, but I'll just kind of give you guys a heads up. Later, I think it's going to hit in November. I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's when it's going to hit. I have some new 5-day drawing challenges coming up, and one of them that's really fun is one of the challenges is you have to draw on rocks.
Cool.
So there's all these rocks, and you gather rocks and use ink, paint pens, you can draw on them. But the one I'm really excited about is I think they're going to release on Halloween. I'm trying to convince them to do it like the day before. I don't know, we'll see. But it's the Monster Drawing Workshop. So what it is it just takes you through a process where you can create your own little like stand-up
Yeah.
desktop monster type
I've been
guy.
seeing those on your Instagram feed, working on those, yeah.
Yeah, oh, by the way, when you see stuff on my Instagram, those are usually sneak peeks of stuff I'm working on or stuff that's gonna come out. I never say that, but yeah, there were a couple of these images on there. But so I was originally gonna create like 4 of them for this course. I ended up creating like 15. It just got addicting. Yeah. They're fun though. It's really simple to do. It's just drawing. It's drawing plus like a creative exercise of sorts. So and the way we shot it, we did it differently too. We actually did a workshop. So there's like 10 to 12 people in the workshop, and I even, before I shot the course, I beta tested it with my wife and my youngest daughter, and they put together their own monsters. My wife didn't like hers. I thought it was cool. It was like a squid, one-eyed bag lady squid. I don't know, it's kind of weird, but it worked. It stood up. Although she kind of cheated. I had to get on her case for that. She didn't follow the directions, so she cut the slots too big, and so it was all wobbly, but it came out okay.
Her creative freedom, her expression of it.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you get a lot of creative freedom when working for Linda to do these kind of projects, or is it their suggestions?
Yeah, they kind of give me free reign. The acquisition, the editor there, she used to be an editor at Rockport, and so I've known her for a while. But she's great. She gets to know each person who does content for Linda, and then we brainstorm ideas. So she saw some other things I was doing, and she goes, we need to do some kind of workshop where you can walk people through creating something. And so that's how that one came about, and it's fun.
Do you get to do a lot of personal projects, just things that for yourself?
I try to turn everything I'm doing on Linda into a personal project.
Okay.
Yeah, that way it doesn't feel like work. So yeah, all of August was just creating little cardboard monsters. So yeah, that was fun.
Very cool. I also saw you've got an update to your book, Vector Bootcamp. That's one we have here in our library that I was plugging.
Yeah, actually, Vector Basic Training.
That's it. Yes, that's what it was.
Yeah, yeah. My friend Stefan has a book called something Boot Camp, Creative Boot Camp, I think is what it is. Yeah. I started. That's all I was doing at night from the end of May all the way to almost the end of August. So it took a while, took longer than I thought it would, but it's so much better than the first edition though. It really is. I've kind of learned a lot after doing videos for Linda how to produce those better. And I rewatched all the videos I did for the first edition of the book, and they felt like hostage quality production. I mean, to be completely honest, I was watching them just going, oh man, why did I do that? That's just so stupid. So everything for the new book is all HD. All the resource files, I went through and organized everything. So they're not just the illustration, but it deconstructs the process in almost all of those. Peach Pit was kind of getting on my case because the resource files alone for the book are 4 gigabytes. Yeah. There's just a ton of stuff in them, and they were trying to get me to, well, can you like not have it so big? And so I showed them it's not a problem by posting on Twitter and Facebook and asking people, so if you bought my book and you got 4 gigabytes worth of resource files, would you complain? And everybody goes, why would we complain about that? Exactly. Well, tell Peach Pit that. They're the ones. So, yes. So they said, okay, fine, we'll deal with it. So.
I know in our freshman and sophomore level classes, we kind of incorporate graphic design history. We want our students to learn about the history of art. that kind of thing. Is there anything that you draw inspiration from historical-wise, or you've learned to do research on?
Yeah, it wasn't until it was about 1997, I guess, that I kind of figured out who really influenced me when I was growing up that I had no idea they did. It was an art director by the name of Jim Flora who was worked for RCA Records. And so growing up, my mom and dad had an LP collection. It was kind of, when I watched Mad Men, they have all the furniture my parents had growing up. But the big console where you open up the top and there's the record player with records in there, you know. Well, my dad and mom had all these big band kind of records, and Flora did all the artwork that's on the covers of RCA Records. And I didn't realize this till the late 90s. I'm looking at his artwork, and I'm looking at some of the artwork I'm creating. I'm going, that looks like really close to his artwork. And it just dawned on me, that's where I saw it. It was when I was a kid, and I saw how his proportions were all whacked out, and that's probably why my proportions are all whacked out, you know. So so I tried to see if it was at that time I wanted to find out if he was still alive, because I wanted to talk to him, only to find out he had passed away the year before. But I talked to his son, and his son emailed me all this artwork that his dad worked on later in his life that is like a completely different style. Oh, wow. And it's kind of odd too. It's like he painted cruise ships, but he would stand them up on end and just put them in a line. It was just kind of weird. I mean, it was nothing like his earlier stuff, but his work had a huge influence on me. I would probably venture to say that Mad Magazine kind of influenced me a lot. My parents wouldn't let me buy it, so I was sneaking it into the house. You know, other kids in the neighborhood were, you know, hiding Playboys, I guess. I was hiding Mad Magazine. So there you go.
How would you describe your style, and have you seen your own style change over the years?
It's because I work with different people. It's kind of like a chameleon. So I've had to adapt and try different styles to try to find more appropriate ways to approach a certain project. And so by doing that, I've discovered, hey, I like this style, this works good for this. Or a good example is the linear line style. I saw that really emerging back in 2003. My friend Felix was doing a lot of that work, and I go, yeah, that looks fun. And for a year, just every time I doodle in a linear style, and that's how I figured out how to work in that style. And I've done that for companies who are pharmaceutical companies. I've done it for toy companies. I've done it for food companies. So that's one style that kind of can apply to a bunch of different genres. Whereas my segmented style, which is very close to what Flora did, I just did the tote bag for South by Southwest Interactive Conference. They asked me to design the artwork for their tote bag. And what interesting thing about that is, man, that conference is so huge. They don't pay any artist to do anything.
Really?
No. And it's they have this idea, oh, it's a privilege.
Oh.
You know, and I said, well, I would be privileged if you gave me 3 gold passes then.
Yeah.
And so I traded out a design for 3 gold passes. So me and 2 of my friends can go hang out. So.
Okay. Is it good for artists to have a variety of styles, to be able to be that flexible?
Yeah, I always tell students who are interested in working in illustration, or if they want to be an illustrator specifically, I think it's important for them to understand design and to develop those skills as well. If you want to be an illustrator, that's great, but frankly, the market is so oversaturated that it's going to be really difficult to make a living doing that. You need to have a broader scope of skills in order to facilitate, I think, a livelihood. And so I think my daughter's that way. She's a really good illustrator, but I pushed on her, you really need to develop your design skills. So if you're designing and you need to work out a design that's more illustrative, it's not going to be a problem because you have drawing skills. So whether or not you ever want to become an illustrator doesn't matter. I think every designer should have drawing skills. And just a minute, I have one thing here I want to show you to kind of reinforce that. I had this pulled out and then I forgot to keep it out. So I was saying I was working on turtles yesterday. So here, these are just a bunch of different explorations for sea turtles. And so I did about 18 of them and just sent the client, the art director, an image of each. And then she went through and she picked like 5 that she thought were good enough to move forward on. And then I built those out in vector form and set up the lockup with the logo type. And so drawing really helps not just to work out ideas and do thumbnail sketches, but really helps you to dial in specifically on some projects. There's some projects you just can't do unless you have an innate ability to draw on some level. So I think it's really important.
Very cool. I'm glad to hear that. I don't want to ask you all the questions. I want to know if my students have anything.
Sure.
I'm going to literally move out of the way and let them speak to you. This is your chance. You will live and die and never get this chance again. So go ahead, guys.
Okay, I'm scooting down.
Hi. I wanted to know, what do you use for illustrating on a computer? Like, I realize you probably do a lot of traditional illustration methods or mediums, but do you have a Wacom tablet? Do you have something else?
Yeah, most of my vector, years ago I used to use a small little Wacom tablet because I developed carpal tunnel, and so I switched to it, and I really liked it after using it for 1.5 years. That's right when OS went from OS 9 to OS 10, and so things changed, and when that happened, Wacom didn't have a driver, and so I had to go back to my mouse, and then I never went back to Wacom. And so I'm still using a mouse, although I hate Apple's mouse. I use a Microsoft mouse.
Oh, wow.
I know. I hate Microsoft, but this works really well. Yeah, it's kind of a contradiction, but I do own a Wacom Cintiq, so I don't use that for a whole lot of vector work. I'm really excited usually if I'm working on a project, it all starts in analog. I'm doing thumbnail sketches. I'll draw out something and I'll refine it, scan it in, then I'll build it. That's usually the process I work on, regardless of what style it is. I do sketching on my iPad. Not a whole lot because I just don't like the stylus. I'm really excited about Apple's Pencil because I think that's convinced me I'll probably be able to do what I need to do finally by using that. And it also gives me excuse to get the iPad Pro, so that's a good reason. I use Illustrator. For 15 years I used freehand, and then I remember the morning the announcement came out that Adobe bought Macromedia, and I'm like, okay, well, freehand's going to die. There's no way they're going to keep this around. And then it was about a year later, I get a call from an agency up in Portland, and they do work with Adobe, and they invite me up for a meeting, and they say, we want to talk to you about doing this poster for the announcement of Adobe CS2. And I'm like looking at him, I'm going, I don't think they realize I don't use Illustrator, I use freehand.
Right.
And so the whole meeting, I'm thinking in the back of my head, okay, do I tell them I use freehand? I don't want to do that. I want to do the project for Adobe, like that. And I'm going, well, maybe I can go home, build it all in freehand, save it out as Illustrator, and then I'm thinking, yeah, but then some guy's gonna in production will notice some meta file and it says created by freehand. Then it'll be like Watergate of creativity, and so I was just stressing. Finally, when it was all said and done, the meeting, I said, sure, I can do it. Didn't tell him. Went home, upgraded to the latest version of Illustrator. And then it was like baptism of fire. One thing I didn't tell him is I couldn't figure out how to do dotted lines at that point. So when you look at that artwork from back then, I did that in freehand, copy and pasted it into Illustrator. So I use Illustrator. It's a love-hate relationship.
I understand.
If you follow me on Twitter, you'll see me rant at times. Back in the day, I used Illustrator for a year from that point going forward. And I thought, well, after a year, I'll be used to it. No, never got any easier. I wrote this blog post, and I get a call one day, and it's the head of marketing for Adobe Illustrator. And they go, somebody emailed me a link to your post, and I read it, and I just want to say that I agree with almost everything you say. And I'm like, really? And I go, well, how about you put me on your beta team? Like that. And they go, okay. So I've been on their Adobe's beta team since CS2. And a lot of the features, at least the features I like, they actually listen to stuff I said, like the pattern tool. I consulted on that in the beta and showed them how I think it should work. They listen to most of it, not all of it. I don't mean this to be a gripe session against Adobe, but it bears saying that almost all of their features that they release are like half-baked. And it's not me just saying that anymore. I know a bunch of other people on the beta team, and they feel the same way. And I really think it comes down to the fact that the people who are developing the software, they never use the software to create with, so they don't know why certain things are important. I've been pointing out certain bugs to them for over 3 years now. One of them is if you convert type and then you have other elements, you're trying to snap it to the anchor points. The converted type, even though it's vector now, it won't snap. It just won't. I don't know. It's a bug. I showed it to them. They confirmed it, but they won't fix it. And there's a lot of things like that they just won't fix. I'm always kind of vacillating from being on their good side and them being really annoyed with me because of something I say in the beta form. So, like, I can't obviously disclose some of the features, but one of the things they were saying, hey, we're thinking about doing this, and I just kind of unleashed on them. I said, why are you even thinking about doing that? Why don't you fix all this stuff over here so it makes it actually works? And then everybody started dogpiling, then they got mad at me again. So
yeah, I can see that happening a lot.
that's usually the way it works. Between me and them. Although that said, some people in the company get irritated because I'm always criticizing the software, and then other people, they like the fact that I criticize the software because it's holding them accountable. So it's kind of a strange dynamic. They keep hiring me, so I guess I don't mind it too much.
Yeah.
So
I think you're doing them a favor, like just pointing out, hey, this is wrong, why don't you fix it? But they're just not fixing it.
yeah, you know what? They don't fix it though. That's the problem.
I see that a lot though. But I was wondering about whether I should get a Cintiq or not, and if I should start out with the small 13-inch or go save up and go higher.
I have a 13-inch HD Cintiq.
Yeah.
Yeah, my daughter has one too. She loves it. She uses Manga Studio a lot, so
Yeah.
that's why she likes it. I'd like to get back to using a Cintiq to build vectors. I've just been too lazy to do it.
I understand.
Great.
Thank you.
What else? What do you guys have?
Okay, well, I know that, like, for me and her, we're both graduating soon. Is there, like, do you have any recommendations or, like, tips for what we should be doing, like, right now to, like, be getting ready for the outside world, I guess?
Yeah, one thing that they never taught me in art school, and it was I only learned it by working at a few places, and then most of it going out on my own, is really understand how business works. And what really helped me in that regard is actually I subscribed to Ink magazine, and it helped me because even though it helped me to understand the mind of the entrepreneur and how they operate, and just understanding business in general, what is really important. It's going to help you to design appropriately, and then within that appropriate spectrum of design, you can be as creative as you want. People view it as limiting. It really isn't. It's just understanding the context. So you can be very creative and the context isn't appropriate, so what's the point? So figure out the context. So understanding business is going to help you in that respect. The other thing is marketing. I used to butt heads with marketing people at jobs I had in the past. I worked at Upper Deck, and their marketing people put together a product development team. And so all these people were on this team, and it was about coming up with ideas of what we could do creatively. And I'm just going, I raised my hand, can we get a creative person on that team? And they go, what are you talking about? I go, well, nobody from the creative department is on your product development team. I think one of us should be. Well, why? And I go, because it's a creative thing you're doing. It's like they just didn't get it. It made me realize that almost always there's two types of marketing people. Those who want to feel like they're driving creative, and those who are really good marketing people and realize creative people should do the creative stuff and they just market it. And when that balance is there, you can do incredibly good things. When there's that kind of knocking of heads, it really impedes creativity. And so understanding marketing, so when you communicate with a marketing person, you can speak their vernacular and use all the same verbiage that they use. It's going to help them realize that not only are you a creative, you understand what marketing's trying to do, and they'll be more acceptable of letting you do what you do best rather than trying to make you an extension of their arm. I don't think they cover that enough in art school. I don't think they even talk about it enough. But it's really important because almost every job you're going to work at, you're going to be dealing with a marketing person. And if you don't understand how marketing works, then you're going to be knocking heads with them, and it's going to get really frustrating.
What do you look for in a portfolio? If somebody's showing their work to a client or meeting with a potential employer, what should be a part of it?
I like to see complex layouts where I can see they've taken imagery and type and texture and color, and if they can compose all of that well, and it looks like something I would see, in Rolling Stone or whatever, then that tells me a lot that they understand balance of shape and form. And obviously those skills improve the more you do that, but I think that shows me a lot I also like to see like a page of logo marks. And frankly, I don't care if they're real or fake. If you're a student, I don't really expect them to be real. And so like I've told all my students when I used to teach in the local program that, you know, just start working on logo ideas, find a business locally. If you think it could be improved, then just redesign it just for the sake of your portfolio. Just make sure it's good. Who cares if it's used or real? You know, if it's good, it's good. That's all that an art director is going to be paying attention to, is if the quality of art is really well done. I don't ever remember any art director asking me if this was real or not. They just commented on the aesthetic and if they thought it was nice. So I think that gets overlooked. Probably those two things. I like to see a sketchbook when I'm looking at a portfolio, just as it kind of gives me an insight into how they think. I think that's good as well. That said, I don't like using sketchbooks. I draw on notepads because sketchbooks hold me. I don't know. It freaks me out drawing in a book. It's like I want the ability to rip out a page and do whatever I want with it. So
Cool.
just draw.
What else? What do you guys want?
I had one, I forgot it. Go on.
How did you like start out after college and get your name out there so people would know, you know, that you do that kind of stuff?
Well, I graduated, this is going to date me here. I graduated from art school in '86. I worked for other people up until 2002, and then that's when I went out on my own. So I worked for other people for about 15 years, and that's where I made all my mistakes. And I had an old boss come up to me not too long ago and said, "Why didn't you ever do this kind of stuff for me?" You know, and I go, "Well, that's where I learned what not to do." he didn't like that. But there's some truth to that. I mean, you don't know everything. You don't have everything figured out when you start. So, you know, you're gonna. That's why my daughter graduated, and she's going to be looking for a job. And people have asked me, "Well, why don't you work with her? Why don't you hire her?" Well, I want her to get experience outside the context of my point of view. I want her to go work for somebody else, get their point of view, have struggle and fail and everything else that comes about within that context, because it's going to make her a better creative person, I think. And then maybe in 2 years, I'll consider that. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. I feel like I'm sitting in front of one of those, one of the Senate panels, like.
I've got you really big on the projector off to the side, so it's like you're an overlord just staring at us.
There's two of you. Like,
There's two of you.
Yeah.
So I could be the Apple thing where I'm
There you go,
like,
yeah. Anything else?
what's your favorite traditional medium? Like media, like paints, graphite, markers, anything?
man, I have not done a traditional painting since around 1996, I think. Although I was cleaning out my closet about a year or so ago, and I found my old art school portfolio, and I started pulling out all these illustrations, and they were done in gouache and acrylic, and I didn't really have any style for myself established, except when I doodled, I did. But all my paintings for illustration class back then were all kind of realistic. And so I posted, and some of them were done in, I do like Prismacolor Premier colored pencils, because you can smear them together and it's almost like painting. And I used to do that a lot in art school. So there was an illustration I did back then of Wayne Gretzky, and it was photorealistic, and I pulled that out. I forgot all about it, and I posted that on Facebook, and like all these people are, I mean, it's completely 180 from what people see in my
Right.
portfolio now. And they're going, what? You know, you did that? And I go, yeah, why don't you do more of that? I go, because I don't find it fun. You know, it's like, if you want realism, just, do it in CGI or whatever. It's like, I like weird proportions and funky kind of stuff. It's just funner.
I understand.
But, I should point out, traditionally though, my daughter introduced me to these. These are, there we go. It's a brush pen.
Oh, okay.
It's
Yeah,
bendy.
I've seen those with Prismacolors and the Copic markers. So like I think
Yeah,
there's some-
Copic markers are great, but these are, it's Pilot brush pen,
Pilot brush.
but I buy these on jetpens.com. These work awesome. This is my favorite pen right now, so I like drawing with it because you can do thick and thin really easy.
Like the pressure sensitivity kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand. Cool.
So, the sea turtle drawings you had just made me think of a question. Would you look at a photograph to get your ideas and inspiration for that? Or?
Yeah, I do. I'll show you another printout to kind of demonstrate that. So I'll do reference where I'll find photographs of sea turtles. And so I'll be looking at this while I'm drawing something out. So it doesn't matter if it's iconic and simple. I'll look at the real thing just to kind of get an idea of the form I can simplify it to. So that's perfectly acceptable. That should be the way it's done. I mean, if I think of any people who can draw better than anybody else, it would probably be the artists at Disney. And if you ever watch the Lion King special features, it's pretty cool. They have this whole section where all the artists, they're at some wildlife preserve and they're sketching from real life lions. It's not that any of them couldn't draw a lion in general. It's just when you reference the real, you're able to pull out those attributes that are going to give you cues of how you can simplify and kind of condense things down into their essence. So, yeah, I think reference is really important.
In my illustration class, I made them do references for like Vikings and root beer and hammers, and I tried to think of something that was difficult to find pictures of. Is there any kind of references that are just a nightmare for you to have to do?
Yeah, I have a good story regarding that. An agency asked me to do a logo for a mortgage company, and can you guys hear me still?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, you kind of cut out there for a second, but he wanted a colonial looking guy with a tricorn hat, and I know what that is. In my head, I see it. I went online and I just couldn't find a good reference of the angle, because the tricorn hat looks totally different when you look at it in a profile view as opposed to the front view. And so I was trying to find an ideal kind of composition of a colonial figure wearing a hat that I could, are you familiar with the artwork of Michael Schwab, that style where it's very graphic and almost high contrast shadows and highlights? If you're not, don't worry about it. Anyway, I was telling a friend of mine, I can't find any reference I can work from for this, and I'm going, if I had props, I could shoot it, but I'm not going to go rent a colonial outfit just to get this reference. And a friend of mine said, why don't you rent the movie The Patriot? And I go, yeah, that's a great idea. And so I rented the movie, and then I watched it, and then I found a scene where it had all these colonial guys standing in a group, and I just enlarge it on my retina and take a screen capture, and then from that I I used that as my reference to draw out my figure, and took some photo reference of the profile of another guy's head and photoshopped it in, and just to composite what I needed to kind of work out the artwork. So yeah, if I can't find it, I either try to shoot it or find some unique way. That's the only time I've ever used a movie like that. But I had an old creative director I used to work with who he would, and this was before Photoshop. This was, it was when Photoshop didn't have layering, believe it or not. Anyway, he would take Xeroxes of different images, and he would just cut out the parts he wanted, and he would like collage them together until he had the figure he needed, and then he'd Xerox that, and then he'd draw from it. And I was looking at it, I go, what are you doing? And he's going, well, I need a guy, and I need him doing this, and I was surprised. It's like it didn't look that great in terms of the composite of the Xerox, but it was almost like the ectoskeleton for what would help guide his proportions, kind of. So it worked.
Very cool.
It's crazy ironic because Mr. Ivey, like Aaron and I are in his illustration class, and he just showed us that technically last week, and we kind of practiced on it this week. So I think that's really cool that obviously it's not just Mr. Ivey.
Yeah. I'm not just making stuff up when I teach my classes. I try to
Even
pull
if
from
you
real
are,
life.
it's still great. I mean,
Yeah. What else?
You mentioned that you teach or have taught classes in the local program. What are the, if you could give us not necessarily a top 10, but a top 3 or a top 2 things that you think are the most important things that students should come out of their art program or their graphic design program with?
I think where the schools have it covered is obviously training them on the tools they need to know. But the 2 areas I think they need to be self-aware of and develop themselves and push themselves in is making drawing a habit and being good thinkers. What I mean by that is I really think it's important to, in order to come up with clever ideas, you have to have a good framework of how to think through those ideas in order to discover clever ideas. And I think that only happens by being curious. I think reading a lot helps. So if you're approaching a logo for some industry and you don't have any idea what that industry is other than it's a floral industry and they make flower arrangements, maybe, that's why I ask questions in my creative brief and follow them up, because it's given me that information I need in order to help me discover a clever way to approach something. So I think those are the skills that you need to kind of be aware of and help foster and grow. They don't really teach you that, but they're really important.
Very good. Anything else?
I have a question about the appropriation of logos and images. In my work, I do a lot of painting, original paintings that become more graffiti-like, more like the wall that has all the plastering of signs and things on it. And so I use a lot of appropriated logos and branded imagery, but yet I'm layering it, I'm manipulating it, and the context is not about the logo itself. The logo becomes like a pattern and those types of things. What is the copyright infringement there? I'm not selling a product, I'm not using the logo to represent a product or that type of thing, but I'm just simply using it as a image within an image.
Obviously, I'm speaking without seeing what you're talking about, but it sounds to me like that would fall under fair use. There's a lot of flexibility in terms of art. You get in a little gray area if it's commercial art, but art in terms of fine art, you can pretty much do anything you want. Even if you sell that fine art, it's still fine art. It's not, it's okay. I mean, Banksy does it all the time. So I think you're okay in that respect. If you're ever concerned about it, I think it's worth the time to email an intellectual property lawyer and say, if I showed you an image, how much would it cost me for you to tell me if I'm safe or not? And I word it that way because you want them to give you a price before you have them do work, because I made the mistake of talking to a lawyer only to get a bill for the 15 minutes I talked to them, because that's how they bill. They bill by their time. Their time is their money. So most lawyers won't do that if you just say, hey, I'm a little confused about this. Could you look at this? And most of them will just, they won't charge you. They'll just, share the information. But without seeing it, that would be my answer.
Well, when I'm working and people, I really think it's within fair use. I think I'm safe, but people are always asking me that question. Well,
yeah.
How much can I borrow? How much can I? And I'm really into appropriating imagery. I don't steal it, I just appropriate it for a while.
Yeah. Well, I think you said it. A lot of people have there's a lot of myths regarding copyright and what you can do to protect yourself, or if you change it 10%, then you're okay. All those are, it simply comes down to the fact, if you created it, you own it, you can use it. If you didn't create it, unless it's for like your context, in your context, it's okay to use because it's fair use, but that would be the exception. So I think you're dealing with in the realm of exception.
Thank you.
But I'm not a lawyer, so.
Yeah, I'm not taking it for that.
Okay.
So don't send him a bill for 15 minutes, okay?
Yeah.
Anything else y'all want to add?
So how many in the group there subscribe to Loot Crate?
I used to. So I have the shirt. I don't know if that's where you recognize it or not.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite shirts. I have the same one.
Yeah, I had to unsubscribe recently, but I really love it, and I think I wore it one time where, I don't know if it was Mr. Ivy's class or not, but somebody was talking about making a general shape with pieces of other things. And they said, like her shirt, the cats and the skull. So
Yeah.
I think it's a really cool shirt.
So is this, so you don't have any male students?
I'm really surprised that nobody else showed up,
Wait, I
but
didn't notice that.
Okay.
our ladies are the willing ones. They're the ones who really get out. They're most help, yeah. Well, I tell you what, I know it's been a great hour talking with you. This has been really, really fun. It's a great way to start off our whole semester, kind of getting to meet you, getting to just jump in and get inspired by what you do. We thank you so much.
Ben?
Yeah.
Vaughn, are you a member of AIGA?
You know what? Ironically, I'm not. I used to be, but the closest chapter's an hour away from me, so I tried to plug in, but I never was able to.
Are there?
I like AIGA though.
Are there associations, art, graphic design associations you are a part of, or any that you would recommend on top of AIGA?
I've spoken at AdFed groups. Those seem to be pretty good where those chapters are at. Once again, the one in our neck of the woods is about an hour away, so I've never joined that. But I've been tempted to create an AIGA group here in Salem because I think it needs one, but I just haven't gotten around to doing it.
Our closest one, we're affiliated with New Orleans, which is about 3 hours away for us. So,
Okay.
yeah. Okay, well, I want to thank you again so much. This has been a great hour talking with you. Y'all please give them show them appreciation. I will sign off for now. Thank you again so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Take
Have a
care.
great day.